Welcome to Dead Time with your host, Holly Faust. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you all to another episode of Dead Time Tales. Tonight, I have some pretty awesome guests, Ron and Lourdes. They're both from the New Jersey area. Ron is a comedian, which is something very interesting. We don't get a lot of that in the paranormal. He's also an author and he investigates the paranormal. Lourdes lives in New Jersey also. She's been fascinated with the paranormal for most of her life. And together they've been working on an offshoot of a direct radio voice. Without a radio, from what I was reading, and it's called the Digital Seance Experience. So, guys, let's welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And just for clarification, I was a comedian. I did spend time doing it. So being a satirist is not a bad thing, especially in this field. It's
Yes,
a
exactly. I'm a comedian and I never got paid for it. So, but I have no sense of humor when it comes to hearing other people's jokes, but I like to make them all the time. So, but
awesome.
okay, so I was reading about this. Now, I am anybody who knows me knows that for years I was anti-tech until I met Lauren Helkerson from
Oh,
Lauren
yeah.
Hunt's, and I was introduced to her crystal pod. And I love crystals. I'm a crystal light therapist. I'm very in tune with crystals around me at all times, and I had her build me a crystal pod. And it's like so me because it's purple, it lights up purple, it has ametrine and amethyst on it, and it has even a little blessed bee underneath which like goes right in line. So for me, when I was hearing, like, I've heard of, when I was reading the paperwork you sent me and the theoretical telephone to the dead. I live in an area where Edison actually ran some of his first lines here in Pennsylvania. We actually have a hotel in the town next to me where it was one of the first working phones in the United States.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it's actually called the Hotel Edison. So, it that intrigued me because I'm a history buff and I've always researched history. That's how I got started in the paranormal. And so when you guys are talking about, like, it's a direct voice without radio.
Yes, and something as a historian fan you'll appreciate. My grandfather worked for Thomas Edison in the West Orange, New Jersey lab. He did battery technology for submarines. That was his military
Oh, that
service
is so cool.
at the time. So
Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
huge history buff. That's why, like, I spend most of my time in Gettysburg, because that's just so close. So I can do a lot there. But yeah, so like, when you're explaining like this, because I was reading so much about it, and I follow you both on Facebook, so I see you guys a lot come through my feed, even though I have so many. For some reason, you guys pop up a lot, and I was really intrigued by it because I just recently, got involved with like spirit boxes and portals. I mean, I was actually able to use a portal at the Bel Air house,
Hmm.
and that was so interesting to me because we always just using regular recorders. The team that I had been with, and it was after I'd left my former team and started traveling with some of my friends, we would actually get a ton of Class A EVPs just sitting having conversations. So I'm kind of intrigued to know, like, how this works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can explain that. And by the way, also for the record, we're both big Lauren Hellickson fans
Yep.
as well. She's fantastic, brilliant lady. Her equipment that she builds seems to breed nothing but satisfaction.
I love it. I got to see her first, and then I had to go back and now I want to get the Nova, the newer one that she's doing. I'm like, I'm addicted, and I was never a tech person. So, but I'm really interested because I'm a spiritualist,
Hmm.
and seances are a big part of our belief system. So when it says like digital seance, I'm very intrigued by it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the name came from. I have five books on Amazon. The third of which was called the Digital Seance Initiative,
Hmm.
and we came up with that as what we would call events that now we just call them experiences instead of initiative. Initiative was the, I guess, the concept turned into proof of concept. But we went with that because we had found when we would run previously, when we started with direct radio voice, we would run these at public events. People would be opening up snacks and drinks and sodas, and there's voices coming through, and they're not hearing anything because they're just completely self distracted. So
Hmm.
we went, well, maybe if we theme this like seances, when everybody's attentive and around a table or whatever and paying attention, not only might we have a better experience because we have everybody kind of focused and everybody's kind of pooling their intentions and all that, but at the same time we'll have people paying attention, and they will catch some of the voices which may not be as loud as others, but still very clear nonetheless. Direct radio voice is something that we brought back in 2019, at least in the States. At the time we did it, nobody was doing anything that we were aware of, and I looked, other than the sweeping ghost box or spirit box modality, which is scanning through the broadcast.
Like the old shack hacks that are now the spirit. I
Exactly,
still
yeah.
have an old shack hack, but I do have a new spirit box. But I kind of, I don't know. For me, it's a struggle because sometimes I'm trying to decipher whether it's radio interference I'm
Right.
hearing, or now I tend to use AM frequencies because there's less of them, especially where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So I find less distraction that way. But I like this concept of not having that
Right.
and just having the same, type of wavelengths, but not having the radio chatter.
Right. So direct radio voice predates the Frank's box, which is where all the ghost box stuff came from.
Right.
Um, and direct radio voice was just using a radio, but it was on like a shortwave or medium wave frequency that not sweeping, just on a static, empty channel, no broadcast emissions whatsoever, no voices, nothing. So we started with that, but then through a couple of experiences, one of which she and I had in New Jersey, at Sterling Mine, under the surface of the Earth, which was a geological Faraday cage. You couldn't get radio or cell signal anywhere, and we were quite far in. We got voices with a radio as a
Wow.
source of the white noise on a static, no broadcast channel. So that told us that there's something to this. And then for a time, we were partnered with Tony Rathman in Arizona. He did an event at a Paracon where he used a sleep machine, which is pre-recorded white noise,
Right.
and that also yielded voice responses. So these are two instances where there was no radio signal, no RF capabilities, and it
Mhm.
still produced voices. So we realized that we don't need a radio signal to do that. And when you remove the radio, which is probably what intrigued you a little bit, you take away a big chunk of the cynical part of what people sling at ITC or instrumental transcommunication, which
Right.
is you're looking for voices. Radios have voices. Ta-da! It's like going to the beach with a handful of
E
coins and then coming back an hour later with a metal
exactly.
detector and going, "Look what I found."
Yep, that is
Bullshit.
the thing that
Yeah.
I was constantly, you know, reneging every time someone said, "Oh, try this, try," because I had a shack hack. I mean, back in the day, that was like, awesome equipment. But I would tell people like, "I don't know. I just to me, it doesn't feel right," because you could be hearing an announcer's voice or a song or, anything like that, and you could think you're hearing something. Like I'm a big believer in don't tell me what you see, let me make my own decision up.
Sure. Sure.
And what intrigued me though, because as someone, that is psychic, I use like when I sleep at night, I have white noise going in my
Mm-hmm.
room. Now, have you had people that have abilities that would come to your events and experience this that seem to hone in better on their own abilities just from being around? Because I know myself, there's some nights where I have to like literally shield myself fully because my white noise is just bringing so much chatter into my brain when I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever heard people say, "Hey, like I'm a psychic and man, these people won't shut up."
I I'm not gonna label I don't label myself as a psychic, but I believe that's what happens to me because I hear those voices, and a lot of times those low voices that I hear that someone else doesn't hear, and I say the words, it means something to them, and
Exactly.
it's life changing
Yeah.
sometimes for them. So I think, and we do have mediums and psychics that love working with us. So I think with being not the first person perspective, but as far as the validation for
Mhm.
the, because if they read someone, because usually they'll read and they're done, then we turn it on, and then we get sometimes things that validated the medium. So I think that's why they like to work with us, and that's how maybe perhaps it can boost up their
Yeah.
ability because of the validation. But
Mm.
honestly, for what you're saying, we've never really asked them. We don't
Yeah,
really
no, and I was going to make a
know,
clarification there too,
but
because of the thing that, and we haven't explained the method it's in its totality, so
Right.
maybe I should do that.
yeah,
Um,
because I wanted to
because
quickly say before about the white noise machine that Tony used. The reason why we don't use a white noise machine and we use a white noise generator is because when he did his experiment, he got 2 or 3 words, 3 words, I think, and it kept repeating over and over because it was a 3-second white noise recording.
it's looped.
It was
Okay.
looped.
Well, yeah,
So
that makes sense.
the voices imprinted on the chip quarter. So he couldn't use that machine anymore. So we needed to get something that produces white noise in real time. Go ahead, explain
Yeah,
the.
yeah. So that's right. That's an important distinction. The same way four recorders can do an EVP session all within inches of each other, but only one of them gets the voice. The
Mhm.
same kind of imprinting we think may have happened with a voice hitting his chip quarter on the sleep machine. So we don't use sleep machines now. But the thing I wanted to clarify was is that the way within which it sounded like you might have been suggesting the white noise helping a medium, I don't think with our method would be applicable because what we do is we run three analog generators that create the white noise, the oscillations in real time without RF signal, no
Okay.
data, and it's a closed circuit system. They run through an interface, and then that interface puts it through a software that we developed. We were initially introduced by this live real time filtration from a gentleman named Keith Clark in Florida
Mhm.
from paranormal.com, and so we developed a version of it of our own. So we're doing everything people do with audio capture when they go home after an event in real
Mhm.
time. We're slowing
Okay.
down the white noise, which had never been done before we did it, filtering it to denoise it, and then giving some amplification to it. That's it. But we're doing it in real time, so the effect that you may have been referring to, the white noise itself is not audible to anybody in the room. It's just
Okay,
the
then
medium.
that's what I was misunderstanding. Because
Okay.
when
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, the Gonzfeld. If
Yes.
you've
No.
ever
Yeah.
done the Gonzfeld, you're
Yeah.
literally like wearing a headset like this, and that white noise is in. I mean, for me, those types of experiences have been, I've left locations crying
I love
because of
doing
the
them.
amount of stuff that
Yeah.
comes in through them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering, like, hey, would I ever be around this and like leave crying? Because that's one thing I don't like to do. I don't, because then everybody calls me a coward. So,
There
Yeah.
is something to the white noise. Me personally, I believe white noise is the key to the communications that we get with spirit in a lot of the methods that people use.
Yeah.
yeah, and I believe that too. I think, and that's why, and you had said, but now the way you explained it, it makes me understand I'm not audibly going to hear the white noise.
No.
That's correct.
So
It's
then,
being
yeah, so
filtered.
then
Being
that,
filtered.
yeah, that would make a big difference because I think it's the actual, hearing it, because even a lot of times when I do investigate, I will wear a headset
Mm-hmm.
with white noise playing and
Right.
walk through buildings. When I was in Malvern, they noticed that I walk around like this. And they said, "You're tuning in your internal radio." And I'm like, "What?" They said, "You're literally tuning in to the spirits." And I never noticed it before. And we've now recorded me at a few locations, and I would be seen like dialing in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I find like I always found portals to be fascinating because of the way they operate. So this, when I'd seen this is something that seems totally different to me.
Yeah, it
Like,
is. The portal devices are adding um, a noise gate, which is like a limiter, um, reverb and echo and stuff, and for trying to make it more audibly, either through repetition or by influencing the sound a little bit. This is literally everything that gets done when people go home with recordings,
mhm,
but being done at the moment of contact. Because once you go home, the conversation that you're trying to have with spirit is over. So
right.
we're doing all that cleanup in the moment. The white noise floor is down, and when we share some clips a little bit later on, what you'll notice that in a lot of it, you may hear blips here and there, but for the most part, it's a lot of silence unless a voice emerges through what we believe is called stochastic resonance. which is if any source signal goes into the white noise or melds with it.
Mhm.
The white noise being every frequency a person can hear from 20 hertz to 20,000. If it resonates or matches one of those, that resonance gives it amplitude so it gets louder. And then when we filter the noise floor out, by the end, what's left is anything that emerged over the noise floor, which is typically either nothing or vocals.
That's pretty fascinating. I'm like, I don't know. I just think it's something so different that, I haven't seen. I don't think very many people in the community, at least that I know of, because like my first time hearing about this was when we had talked about you guys coming on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started noticing more. I work for my husband, so I spend most of the day scrolling Facebook. I do all of his billing. So I sit in the office most of the day, and if I'm not writing, I'm scrolling. And so I can now understanding that it's going to be silent and you're going to hear things. That to me is remarkable because I've heard things like I said through a portal, through the shack hack, through the spirit boxes. I hear things in my head all the time, and but to be sitting and having these like what we would call EVPs coming out in real time is something that I don't know of anybody really doing in the community, like without utilizing a recorder or some type of other equipment.
Yeah.
There are people doing variations of what we're doing. And Keith is also he's teaching the bare bones of the VST that we use. So
Okay.
there are people doing versions of what we do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
their own versions of it. Joshua Sean's a brilliant ITC operator engineer who's doing his own version of it. We used to be partnered with Tony Rathman, who's doing what's called Staticom 3.0. Since the partnership dissolved, he has his own version of it that he's doing now. Um, After working with us and ours, which is for us good because of the more people who take their own stab at this, the more we circumambulate the notion of communicating with spirit, and we can show it repeatedly in different ways and different methods with different people. I think it only strengthens our position of there being validity to this stuff. We think that the ghost boxes, the shack hacks, and everything, we think that they work on the same principle.
Right.
So they work, but if we're correct, and if they can work based on the resonance with the white noise, then that
Hmm.
would also explain that how sometimes um, you'll hear the voices, and she noticed this at first. Sometimes the voice is really low, and it's competing with that of the sweep, and
Right.
sometimes it's so loud and clear you don't even hear the sweep anymore. It replaces it. That would be an amplitude based on resonance, probably,
Hmm.
and those devices seem to yield shorter results. There's a brevity to the messages, which, if you think about it from the resonance principle, like we just mentioned, if resonance and access to it brings the voices out, then anytime a sweeping box hits a station, where even for a millisecond or so it gets broadcast, that would be like if you and I were on the phone and I kept intermittently hitting the mute button, right?
Right.
So they may be getting longer messages, but what comes through is shorter because of the sweep itself is probably self-inhibiting.
Right. So
Well, that's interesting.
when I would identify voices in the ghost boxes,
Yeah.
you got to use discernment because when I identified voices in the ghost boxes, I never heard them within the suite.
Yeah.
I always heard, like he said, I always heard them above or below. And
Hmm.
when people heard them within the suite, a lot of times I can tell that it was radio. I was like, oh,
Right.
that's radio.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what I say. Like, when they came out with those, I don't know, I call them connects. I know that's not what they're called, but they're from the
Oh, the
Xbox.
SLS
Yeah.
connect.
I was just like, but wait, I know how those work. My husband works with electrical motors and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of know how Faraday boxes work, how
Yep.
Tesla coils work, how all this stuff works. And I call people on it. Like, no, that's not a ghost catcher. That's a Tesla coil. And that's not how it's supposed to work. There was one prominent ghost hunter that I actually got blocked because I called him on it. But,
Yeah.
you know, um, so for me, like I would always say, like, like those cameras to me, they were too easy to mimic because they do pick up latent energy of a person where they've been standing. So that
Oh.
was like, oh, like I was never a debunker. When I got involved in the paranormal, I believe it, and you don't need to prove it to me, and everything is paranormal. Now, I was also 18 years old, so that was 32 years ago, when we didn't have the stuff that we have today, or half of the evidence that we have today.
Right.
And now I have become, I like to call it like a skeptical, but in a good way. Like I'm the type of person that gets kicked out of paranormal groups for telling people that orbs aren't ghosts. I get kicked out of tons of them because, I'm saying, well, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but they're not enough to prove, especially if you're outside in the middle of the night, that it's a bug.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
a couple of things. You bring up a lot of good points in one sentence. Let me see if I can remember and unpack these. With the ghost box, we always govern everything we get, and we do it with our method now. Timing and relevance.
right?
Yes, radio voices and the broadcasters, you could get stuff. Sometimes it runs through longer, even though it's sweeping fast. You still hear a full thing come through from a radio.
Yeah, that
But
happens.
if you say, "What's my name?" and the voice says, "It's Holly,"
Right.
the odds of that coming through on a radio broadcast are astronomical. So that I would give a serious look to something like that.
And I agree
Um,
with that because we
yeah,
had an ovulus the one time, and we were with our team down in North Carolina, and the ovulus literally said, "Elfie's hungry." Now, that's not a common name that the ovulus would have programmed into it.
right.
And then a few minutes later, Elfie's partner walks into the room to get Elfie food.
Yeah,
So for me, I was like, okay,
yeah,
that I would attribute to paranormal occurrence. But if it's shouting demon, demon, demon at me, I'm not gonna attribute that to a paranormal thing at all. I'm
right.
just gonna say that's a program.
Right. And
Yeah.
then sometimes too you see people will buy a spirit box and then I don't know why the websites do this that sell equipment, but then they'll sell people also purchase these things with it. And one of the things they recommend is a Faraday pouch. So they'll put the spirit box in a Faraday pouch to block the radio. Um,
Right.
I don't know why that is. That's like buying a sink and blocking the water. Like it's a radio. But then they'll run an orbital speaker out of there with a 3.5 millimeter plug so that the wire's coming out of the pouch, but the radio's still in there, so the signal's conducted around it. But they just recreated the antenna with the speaker wire. So
And now I never knew that, but at the same time, I knew it wasn't smart to put, a spirit box in a Faraday bag. I'm like,
It doesn't
yeah, the
make sense.
methodology is meant to sweep through radio. Why would you block one of the ingredients that you need for the method to do what it's designed to do?
yeah, I would all constant. I also like. I mean, I don't know if it's the same as when people would put their voice recorders into the Faraday pouches, or not, because I used to see that years ago.
That's not as bad because
Yeah.
it's
But I
still
never understood it. I mean, I can understand you don't want interference, blah blah blah, but at the same time, like I don't understand like that usage. And it's because I'm not techie. Yeah, I'll be the first to admit it. Like I break tech more than I work with it. And my former team, I went through 8 voice recorders in a year because I would break them constantly. I don't know what I'm doing with them. So I let other people do that and I do my thing.
And then with the SLS, with the I didn't know about the energy latency, but what I do know, which I see all the time, and it breaks my heart, is when there's a chair and they saying that the ghost is sitting in the chair, or there's a lamp and they're saying that the it drives me crazy
it's
because it's
The
magic.
only
Yeah,
reason why I knew that is because we're gamers. Like our free time, me and my kids is spent playing Fortnite, playing, narrative driven games on the PlayStation and the Xbox. That's what we do. Like I don't even know how many hours I have logged in video gaming. And so I knew from when we had the Connect, because we would be there doing our stuff and we would walk away or somebody would walk away and it would still be going. And I'm like, wait, how could that happen? And then we understood there's like an energy latency that your body leaves behind, that it takes time for the camera to realize that you're no longer there. Now, I don't know if they've gotten better as they've become more technologically advanced and more people. I think they're funny. I like to look at the little things dancing around the screen and whatnot, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm
well,
sold on it.
well, let me ask you a question. What do you think about when they ask they get a figure and they ask the figure to raise their hand or do something, and they ask
Now
a
that
question.
I would be more prone to believe is something because it's
Yeah.
actually following a command. But when
Yep.
it's just there dancing like this, I'm like,
Yeah,
I
doing
don't
nothing.
know. Like
Yeah.
tell it to do something. Because for me, I don't think residual hauntings are gonna show up on something like that. Because to me, that's a loop. And that's already something that's not in my opinion. I'm no scientist, but to me, I don't think that's as something as much that's going to give as much energy as something that's an actual like haunting. To me, it's like watching a videotape, and I don't know if that videotape would carry over that type of energy to show up on a camera. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree. It's more impressive if something happens on command or something. It's more difficult, I guess, to dismiss than something like like just it could be like the lamp, like you said, being mapped, and then it's dancing around and stuff.
Right. Or someone that had been standing right next to that person previous.
Right.
You don't know what type, like, I mean, I'm a big believer in energy, and that we exude a lot of it ourselves. And we don't know, like, and I only know from my experience as a gamer what
Right.
I've seen. So
Right.
that's all I have to go by until someone can prove to me that that's not the case. And that's my thing I say all the time. Prove it to me. Prove it to me.
Yeah.
I
People
know
don't
we
want to
live in a
accept
field
it.
that's not always provable, but if you can put doubt in my head that
Yeah.
it's, like, oh yeah, that's definitely, like, I've heard, like you said, listening to a spirit box, I understood exactly what you said when you said you could hear it over and under,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't actually on the sweep because I experienced that in Gettysburg. First of all, like the ghost box wasn't even working that well because we were out near the triangular field, and most of the time your equipment's going in and out there anyhow.
Mm.
But I was getting stuff, and I don't know if I was getting it in my head or if it was coming out of the spirit box, but I was hearing stuff. So I was hoping it was coming out of the box and that people weren't just looking at me like I was crazy.
Yeah. No, that for sure. And a lot of this stuff we look at too, like to explain, like our theory with resonance and how the white noise works for communication is based not just on a couple of those experiences or experiments that we mentioned, but also even if you look at the way that the ghost box is explained,
Hmm.
right? The idea is that it's sweeping through broadcasts, and then that spirits are somehow, through ways no one's ever been able to explain, reaching into this device with their ethereal fingers and moving fragments, little allophones and phonemes of sound that form words. They're moving them at breakneck speeds, like somebody playing Scrabble on cocaine, putting the right sounds together to make the right words at the right time to answer the question that was just asked. And there's no latency because a lot of times, as you know, answers come out before you finish the question, right after you finish the question.
Exactly.
No time for a sound wave to travel and then traverse back and be processed somewhere through any kind of comprehension. So it completely defies physics.
Hmm.
And if you're dealing with sound and you're going to take sound as an explanation the way physics explains it, then you have to stick to physics the whole way. You can't abandon it and all of a sudden go with the just ghosts just know how to do
And
this.
I'm
Now,
so glad I don't understand. I never took physics in high school. Like I taught my kids from home, and two classes that I had to teach were chemistry and physics, and I was crying
Oh,
because I have dyscalculia. I am not a math person. That's why I didn't take those classes.
right.
But so I don't understand physics. I just go by what I know, as a lay person. And to me, I don't know. I think because I went to the Rhine Institute and I took courses with the Kostler Institute out of Edinburgh University on parapsychology.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it, is it really them manipulating or is it psi? Is it like telekinesis? Is it we think it's coming through there, but it's not? That's my theory. Is that just a way for us to open up those lines of communication and then they're using some other type of phenomena to get through to it?
I mean, we believe the communicate. We are part of the equation. So
Right.
we believe it doesn't happen to us or by us, but through us.
Right.
So when you talk about, oh my god, I lost my what were we just
Telepathy.
oh yeah, the telepathy. So in our opinion, we don't think it's that we are causing that to happen sometimes, because we are part of the equation. You can't have the communication without us.
Without us. So, like,
So
kind of like with someone like us that do Reiki, we don't believe that we are the Reiki or that energy. We believe that source is coming through us to give that energy to okay, now that and
that's
that makes sense to me too. Like, I have, unfortunately, so many schools of thought that run to my brain.
Hmm.
And I bring them out because I'm actually like, this has been my life, since I was a child. I had psychic experiences at like 3, 4 years old in a house that was a former meeting hall for the Ku Klux Klan.
ooh,
So there was all kinds of activity going on in that house from the time I was very little, and we had multiple suicides and everything. And people would tell me I was insane.
yeah.
And I remember very clearly in 1986, the Smurl haunting happened in Pittston, PA. They call it Pennsylvania's Amityville. And I seen Ed and Lorraine Warren on television. On my local television, I had no idea who these people were, but they're talking about the preternatural, the supernatural. Now, in 1986, I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I just was like, oh, I'm not the only one. There's people that are, and that's when my whole journey started. Then I lost my friend to suicide when I was 18. And I was told he could not possibly get anywhere but the bad places because he committed suicide and he was gay. And I was bound and determined to prove to them that wasn't true. And, I've been very lucky that I have, as a psychic, had that communication that I know he's around and he's happy. And we were at an actual seance where he came through and let me know that he was sorry for what he did.
Yeah.
But I'm still, it doesn't answer all my questions. And I'm like, but now I need to know this. So for me, I'm always asking questions, like, cause I was insular for 15 years of my life. I knew that there was this whole other world out there
Hmm.
and now I'm finding all these other people and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I never heard of this crap before. Tell me more. So,
We have similar backgrounds because my family, I was born into the
You keep shaking the chair as if it's
you
an
were too.
earthquake.
This was shaking before when you were
Okay.
doing it. But anyway, I didn't point it out. But okay. Um, I was born into the paranormal too because my family practiced espiritismo, which is a
okay.
form of mediumship in the
Yep.
Caribbean. So I was always around it. The paranormal was the normal for me. That's the way it was. And then I they were physical mediums, right? And my family's huge, and it was 10 children. My mom is one of them, but she
Yeah.
didn't
Sounds
practice.
like, yep. I get it.
Yeah, so she didn't practice. So we were in a ceremony, and we would go a lot. And my cousin's channeling, and all of a sudden she bumps into my mom, and all of a sudden now they're both channeling, and knowing, and we were little, me and my brother, not even 2 digits, and we were traumatized because she was moving and talking in ways that we knew that that was not my mom. And then after, I don't know how they got it out of her, but afterwards she couldn't remember anything. She didn't remember anything, and that terrified me. So for
And it is
years,
terrifying for kids.
yeah,
I mean, I was lucky. My son started exhibiting abilities and, he would tell me this black man was following him. And at first I thought, somebody was following him, like he was like 5.
right,
And I get all protected mama bear. And then I realized it wasn't a person. And I thought, "Oh, no, dark, that's evil." And that's when I met Lorraine in person, and she explained to me, "Honey, he has gifts just like you, and he's trying to my son was raised in the paranormal, but the psychic realm of it, my mom was assimilated into Catholicism, where the rest of the family was very indigenous. She was not. So she tried to have me exorcised
mm,
because of the things I would hear and see. And my son he was very precognitive. So he would say, "Oh, he told my husband my husband's uncle was going to die and he told him how it was going to happen and what he saw." And my husband just blew him off, and then 6 months later it happened exactly the way my son had told him. And
mm-hmm,
now my son learned to block it because he hated it. He now my girls, my middle daughter didn't want it, but she gets it anyhow. And my youngest, that's all she wants. She wants to talk to them. She wants to know what they're doing. She's like me. It's
Mm-hmm.
a concept. Like I don't even know half the time if I'm talking to people that are living or if they're dead. Like my husband will see me talking, and he's like, "Who are you talking to?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
I
"Don't
mean,
worry
we
about it."
believe that all of us, we are all mediums. We are.
Hmm.
It's just that it comes easier to others that, and if you don't practice it, it
It
won't.
goes away.
Right. So
Yep.
that's it. But honestly, we are all mediums. We are. It's just the more you practice it, the better you
The
get
more you
at.
use it, that's what I was told because in the beginning I only had the feelings, like I could feel people around me.
Yeah.
And as I started embracing it and learning more and being mentored and going to classes, and I spent a lot of time at Lilydale and, learning all of this, more things started appearing. Like we were investigating a house in outside Pittsburgh. And the next thing they knew is I'm on the ground. Something is speaking through me that sounded like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And nobody knew what to do, but they have it all on recording. But
Yeah.
then when they sent the recording to someone, they couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
There was nothing on it. But yet everybody saw me speaking, but the recording was dead silent.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
and now unfortunately that recorder was lost in California. So
Mm.
none of us will ever get to hear it again because we always said there was a reason because this location we were told multiple times not to be investigating to begin with. Yeah, we were given multiple warnings. There was a lot of bad crap that happened, to people there. And but we still had to do it. The owner's wife, like it would lead her to want to commit suicide. Every time I was left alone there, things would start talking through me. Like they'd literally watch as my eyes would flip in the back of my head.
Yeah.
A-
If you're not used to that, it is scary. If you're
yeah.
not used to seeing it, it's a scary thing
And
to
when it
see.
happens to you for the first time and people are telling you what you just went through and you're hearing it coming back through recorders, you're like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I am just fascinated by all the tech now. Because, like I said, the last piece of tech before I had left my old team that I even worked with was like the the Geiger counters
Mm.
and a Trifeld. That was like my experience with tech, and I didn't even know what I was supposed to do with them. I just would say the needle's moving, the needles. I'm clueless, but yet you give me like a pod, and I know I'm supposed to watch for that light, and I know if that light's going off, something's happening. Yeah, I don't know how it works, but to me, I haven't found it to not be truthful for me and in a location yet. I take it a lot of places, and I have both of them that I kind of use together because they both measure different wavelengths. And
Yeah.
is that basically what yours does too? Does it measure at wavelengths, or is it just the noise that's allowing the voices to come through?
Yeah, it's just the white noise. It's created through the generators in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's no external input, no ambient input, no microphone. There's no data in the white noise. It has a spectral frequency of one, meaning everything within it is at the same volume or amplitude level. So there's no variations in it. But what happens is when it's filtered through the resonance, you'll get spikes in the forms of words or phrases that will come through because when they resonate enough, they'll jump over the noise floor that we filter out.
I'm
Um,
just I'm like so astonished by this because like I understand it works, but in my brain, it's just to me, I'm trying to like wrap my head how. That's all that I keep like I'm hearing you, but in my brain, because I think it's because it's something I've never seen before and I've never experienced as an investigator. Like, have you taken this to a lot of locations, like
oh yeah,
historical
We take it
locations?
everywhere.
yeah, yeah.
Have you used it at Penhurst yet?
Yes.
We did it at Penhurst last year at the Paracon. We went last year, and we're going back this year in September to the UK to Festival of the Unexplained to present and demonstrate this. We do it with it's a twofold approach. One of it is the voices that we get and the way that we get them, and the other
Hmm.
part of it, and she was kind of alluding to it a little bit, is that we also have a philosophy of mind or or consciousness that's it's a metaphysics which is called analytic idealism. And I know a lot of people, I think, in the paranormal apply or use the word metaphysics as meaning something spiritual or beyond science. Science can't measure or talk to it. It does. That's not what it literally means. That which stands behind the physics. So when you mentioned even before about proof, right? Math proves. Science doesn't even prove.
I know. That's why I
Science
stink
leans
at
into
math.
what's most probable based on all factors that are knowable. If with this we even know what all the factors are. So so the proof thing is not necessarily a fair barometer for any of this. If it's not to
Right.
prove it, you want to make a compelling case for something for sure.
Exactly. Because in science we hypothesize
Exactly.
and then try to get, a proof
Right.
for it. Not even a proof, but
A
to
result.
yeah, a result to our like, and I tell that to people all the time. As investigators, we are supposed to be making a hypothesis. We're not supposed to be going into a location and say, I'm going to find a ghost. No, well, this is what we're going to do. And hopefully this will give us some evidence to say, maybe
It's
there's
interesting
something here.
because I was having a discussion with someone, and I was asking him because I think all everything that we see and communicate, it's all telepathy to me. I think
Hmm.
that's how it's happening. Now that's my theory. So I went to this person. I was like, "What do you think about maybe telepathy is the way that the communication is happening with?" And his answer was, "I don't know about telepathy." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, I don't know. I just don't know about it." And that was it. You don't
And
know
I
about
think
it,
it's
but
because,
why?
right. And I think that's because, like, most modern and more current investigators have never really looked into, because they don't teach psi at university levels anymore. Like, I think the only parapsychological unit in the states that I know of is the Rhine. And they talk about that. They just did, and I can't, biophotons.
Yeah.
They're doing those and I was like there seeing some of it, and they're talking about how, like, you're in a vacuum and there's nothing, nothing, and then energy workers start doing their woogity, and millions of biophotons start emerging, like, yogis and people like that are creating that energy field. And to me, that's fascinating. That's the paranormal that I'm so intrigued by, because it's proof that energy can be, amassed through energy work, or however you want to call it. But at the same time, to me, it's not proving the ghost question or the spirit question. It's just proving to me, okay, so there is, like, premise behind Reiki and yoga and stuff like that. But what is that showing me about how we can communicate with the other side of the veil?
Right.
And
It
that's
opens up
what I'm intrigued by.
it
Right.
opens up a bigger picture because science models and predicts what behaviors nature will do or won't do, and then experimentation through science is where you have hypotheses and theories,
Right.
and then you look for an outcome. It doesn't tell us what nature and reality is. It doesn't tell us what's behaving. That's the metaphysics, and metaphysics. There's a few of them. The primary one that most people today, and most of them probably unknowingly adhere to, is physicalism, or used to be called materialism.
Mhm.
So when I mentioned before about physics, that's what I was saying is that what people in the paranormal have a tendency to do a lot is to say that something's happened, and then they invoke science, because it's the neo priesthood of our day. So you need to have science mentioned or somewhere involved in what you're doing. And then when the explanation seems to become internally inconsistent, when it lacks explanatory power, then what they do is then they go to spirituality and go, well, the ghosts just do this, or this is just kind of what happens,
That
and then they
always
fall
blows
off
my
that
mind.
path because of the path that they were taking was based in physicalism. Now, science should be agnostic. Science should be metaphysically neutral because it's based on experimentations, outcomes, results, hypotheses. It's not based on having a position on what reality is, right? So people not knowing what their metaphysical stance is, they're applying it one way or the other, and not knowing what it is, they start on a physicalist path using physics, using classic physics, and then they try to escape sometimes through the quantum door to be able to explain stuff because there's things about quantum physics and
Yes,
entanglement and string theory. So that's their back door out of the explanation. It's already gone off the rails, but then
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't do it, and then they end up somewhere perhaps in spirituality because it leaves the door wide open because science can't talk to that stuff,
exactly.
and it's a mess. And so
It's a
they
mess.
don't put anything on the table that has any empirical grounding or any explanatory power whatsoever. So to me, for us, and what it says on our little title thing here, idealists, we subscribe to what's called analytic idealism. It's an ontology. Which is a study of beingness. It's a philosophy. So for me, the first step is if you're going to say this is real, this is not real, right? This does this. Science is telling us this behaves that way. You have to have an idea of what your position is in as a metaphysics. What do you believe there's a physical world out there outside of consciousness, and your brain creates consciousness? Because then there's problems that come with that.
Right.
Do you believe that everything out there is conscious? Because there's such a thing as that. Do you?
Animism.
Yeah, right. Animism, right? Or
I'm an
panpsychism.
animist, so that's how I knew that. I believe everything has a
Ah,
soul.
Yeah.
That's how I
or
was raised.
panpsychism.
Yep.
Panpsychism.
Panpsychism. So panpsychism was a way for physicalists to try to stick to that everything isn't mental, everything isn't fundamentally mental or thought, which is what idealism
Hmm.
says. But then it runs into the combination problem, panpsychism. If everything has consciousness, every cell, every molecule, every physical things, inanimate things, everything's conscious. That's what
Yes.
panpsychists will say. The problem with panpsychism is it runs into what's called the combination problem. If the table's conscious, and then I take a leg off the table, does that leg have its own consciousness? What if I nail it back to the table? How do you reconcile those
That's
two
interesting.
consciousnesses into
Yeah, I
one?
don't go that far. Like as an animist, I believe everything has a soul or like you could say a consciousness, but a soul. So to me, as an animist, with the table, that's already gone because you've taken that soul from that tree when you've destroyed it to create the table.
Understood.
So
Oh,
that's how
okay.
an
So that's
animist
a
believes
That's
that
yeah,
all
interesting.
things, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
a rock has a soul. A tree has a soul. The blades of grass have a soul. But when you take them away from that, like a human being, if you take us and remove a limb from us, cut it down, that limb's no longer alive.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I can understand a little bit of what you're saying about the people that believe everything has a conscious and the table thing. Yeah, that's not an animist viewpoint at all because we believe once you take that tree and make it into a table, the soul is gone.
Yeah.
That part of that tree is dead. Like if you would remove our my arm would be dead. So, and that's just being native and being Scotch Irish. I was around the Celtic belief system, which is very animistic, and then the native belief system, which everything is alive. And that's why I struggle a lot in the paranormal world because you get into the cryptid side of things, and people are using our folklore and just shouting it out. And I'm like, no, 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 don't say Windy Boy out loud. It's gonna come and get you. so,
Yeah.
so yeah. So for me, I think because I think there's multiple schools of thought, even in how people approach the paranormal. They approach it scientifically, or they approach it spiritually, and they don't know what their spiritual beliefs are, but they're just bringing in a mishmash of a bunch of different beliefs. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it
That's
confuses
the way
me
to do
because
it.
I follow a spiritual path, and I that's why I didn't use a lot of tech because for me as an investigator, my job wasn't to prove anything. My job was to tell the stories of the locations, of the people, of the things that I was feeling. And when I do private clients, I do a lot of work with private clients. My job is to help them either learn to deal with it or get it out of their lives. And I approach that through their faith base, not through mine. I don't go in there saying, well, I'm going to burn some sacred medicine and all your things are no, no. What do you believe? Do I need to bring a priest in? Do I need to get holy water or, an imam, And so I can understand like scientifically there's so many schools of thought and nobody like ever goes the same way. Like I've heard at different events I've been at, like people go through 4 or 5 different scientific thought frames and then they have me confused.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sitting there thinking, but then what was it then? like what, like I don't understand what you're saying. Was it a spirit? Was it an entity? Was it a wavelength? Was it, and people confuse me when they start
Yeah.
trying to talk their, like, cuz I'll admit right off the bat, I ain't going to talk a lot of science because I don't know the science side of it. Only what I've learned, and that stuff is all psi based. It has nothing to do with the investigative process because that's not what they teach in parapsychological courses. So like anybody that goes around, oh, I'm a parapsychologist. I'm like, really? But that's different than being a ghost hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no, it is
So
different, and we're even more black swan than that because being under the idea of analytic idealism, which is a philosophy or metaphysics, it's
right.
not it's in league in some ways with beliefs that come from parapsychology, but
Mhm.
not in totality. Um, but I understand what you're saying because I think a lot of what happens in the paranormal is kind of akin to what you were saying, where it is not only cool, but for some reason. Uh, there's this belief that science is the last word and the governing thing on validation for what's real or not. So people invoke it. They invoke it either at the same time that they're conflicting or clashing with it,
Right.
or they abandon it mid explanation, like I was saying before. Um,
well, like panpsychism, because you didn't get to, because
Yeah.
what I wanted to say with panpsychism is that when people believe in that, let's say that, and this is all with respect, I'm saying it, so I don't want you to get
Oh,
offended.
no, no, you're fine.
But if everything has a soul, they don't realize that then they are suggesting that we ourselves come from the bottom up and
Mhm.
that we are assembled and we know that we're not. And there's a dualism there.
yeah,
Right.
And if you
yeah.
so
Oh,
they
no,
that's
I
the
can
combination
totally,
problem.
no, no,
Yeah.
and I'm of that belief, yes, everything has a soul, but what differentiates humans, us, from the rest of the world is free will. We were given the ability to make decisions and choose things of our own free will. And
Metaphysics.
that's the minister in me talking,
Yeah, yeah,
being a minister, but that's a religious discussion. And to me, if I'm talking historical, if I'm talking hauntings and talking stuff like that, I'm not really, to me, that my religion doesn't belong in that
yeah,
building. And that's how I try to, like, yeah, I
I like
believe
that you
in
have.
I
my
just said metacognition is what I meant.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
have
yeah.
medic.
metacognition.
Yeah, I like that you have a vast array of knowledge and a bunch of these different things because we don't have these types of conversations probably enough
Yay!
with people who understand a lot of this stuff. But under analytic idealism, there's a certain level of rigor and conservatism. It's we're more naturalist and reductionist in the approach to it. But just like as an example, like if we believe so idealists believe that consciousness is the substrate for reality. It's
Mhm.
from which everything can be explained, but that itself which cannot be reduced to anything else to explain it,
Okay.
right? So that's an idealist perspective. There's different types of idealism out there. We study under Dr. Bernardo Castrop, who I do an ambassadorship with. I actually do meetings with him and a group of people every week now, and so it's a more stringent but analytical version of idealism, with reality being fundamentally mental.
Mhm.
So, as an example, like when we talked about like the panpsychist thing, if one were to say that the rock had consciousness, it would still have the same combination problem. Like if the rock is on the mountain has consciousness, and then the rock comes off of the mountain. Does it have a joined consciousness every time it touches the mountain as it rolls down to the bottom? And then if it unites with the mountain, you have two consciousnesses that you have to reconcile into one. The thing I
Right.
guess that's difficult is that what what what's called a soul comes from the same root word of psyche,
Right.
which is we believe your inner phenomenal conscious life. Your what's you, what it is to be you. So there's no way to quantify that. So to say that any inanimate object like a rock or something like that has a soul without being an appeal to magic, there's no way to substantiate it.
Exactly.
So it makes it a little bit more tricky. Where as an idealist, you would say that the rock is part of what we call the inanimate world,
Mhm.
but it's part of what's called mind at large. So there's one universal consciousness, right? There's the oneness from which we all come. Each of us is a dissociated alter, an individuated fractal part of that one mind. And then mind at large is the inanimate objects and other things out in nature that are separate from us. But anything that's sentient, like animals or like us, anything where we see consciousness in nature, typically are self-organizing, metabolistic, ATP burning creatures.
Right.
That's where you'll see consciousness. Um, so there is obviously there's intelligence that are shown like on a high level in a hive mind situation. Like you have a colony of ants that can do something that's architecturally brilliant, but individually they don't have that same prowess um, in intellect, each individual ant, but as a collective, for some reason, there's some kind of an emergence that comes from like a group intelligence almost. But again, different from what's
I
inanimate.
think what makes us apart from everything else is that we're able to metacognize. We're able to
Right.
reflect. That's
That's a big difference.
that's
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
and I believe that too. And
yeah,
like that to me, like is a big thing too. You know,
yes.
and I do think that me personally, I think all of us in the field, like, when we talked about it, I just remember the one big study, The Weight of a Soul.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the Rhine was actually trying to replicate it, but instead of like doing it with animals where they would weigh an animal before death and after death, they were doing it with remote viewers and people that would do like psychic dream walking, where they got up, where they believe their soul leaves their body,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were measuring like, and this was, I can't even remember how many years ago that I was there, but I was fascinated by that because I'm like, if someone's remote viewing, or and allegedly their soul is leaving to be in another location, well then it would make sense that their weight would fluctuate or would change if the soul or consciousness has weight. But we don't know that because
right. You know
we
what's
haven't been able to prove it.
right? No, and nor will we probably ever. You brought up a really really cool point.
Yeah, I
Um,
know what you're gonna say.
do you? Let's
Yeah, go ahead,
see
go
if you're
ahead.
right. A lot of times she knows where I'm going before I go with it. So something like that is interesting because we talk about this a lot. The language that we use not only has limitations, but it compels us a lot of times for the purposes of discussions to invoke terms or to use references to things to give things proper noun names purely for the arbitrary purpose of discussing them or referring to things, but they don't have individuated ontological status in and of themselves, right? Um, so, like a lot of times when we speak, we'll do it to the audience. We'll go, "What's this?" And they'll go, "It's a fist." And you go, "Where did it go?" So it was never a thing. It
You're
was a
right.
doing. This is a behavior of
It's
the
a
field of
behavior.
subjectivity. It was not an actual thing. So some things are known through inference, and the words we use can be tricky. Like in that study, the weight of the soul. You
Right.
would infer from the title and from what they're saying that somebody somehow found a way to weigh a soul or to weigh a consciousness.
uh,
They didn't.
they
They
didn't.
inferred through the difference in weight at the time of somebody passing that there was this, I forget, was it like a half an ounce or something
I
difference or
can't remember.
whatever.
I can't
Right.
remember the exact number, but it
It's
was with
similar
animals, of course.
similar to how they determined the idea of dark matter, dark energy. It was
Right.
inferred because per physics, the intensity at the genesis of an explosion, you would have the greatest amount of acceleration and expansion. So if the universe is quickening and expanding and still going and it's moving faster, this far out from whatever the Big Bang was and where it was, they inferred dark matter as something that could explain the fact that that's happening per contradiction with what physics would say post explosion, right? So it's through inference that so dark matter was determined through inference. The soul measuring thing is the same thing. There was an academic paper that came out not I forget how long ago that said scientists finally found where in the brain memory stored, and you go, oh, because they've never to date found
I
memory stored in
see
the
that.
brain.
I see a lot of that stuff, and I'm just like,
They've never found memory stored in the brain. So this is
right.
the article, right? So then you read the paper, and what they said in this paper was is that, and she mentioned it, metacognition. Um, so there's a difference. side note, to be conscious is to experience. To be conscious is to experience. To know that one experience is to be metaconscious, or that's metacognition, when you can
Mhm.
reflect. All right. So what they determined in that study was is that when somebody has an experience, when they have a memory or they recall the experience, that the neural pathways mirrored the same patterns that they did when they had the original experience. Hence, they
Okay.
found memory in the. They didn't find memory in the brain. They found something that when you recall it, the neural pathways the same. But it's misleading if you
Yeah.
look at the way that
It
they
is
studied.
because I actually, and I don't know what the name of the machine is, but we worked with a psychologist out near Pittsburgh, and he had this brain mapping thing that we would put on, and he would do
fMRI.
I don't know what it was, but like you can like use your brain to like make a ball move in the box and out of the box, in the
Oh,
box
Not
and
a
out of the.
not fMRI. Okay.
I don't know what it was, but he would literally watch as people that were psychics or mediums. It was me and another gentleman that was out there, and see where our brain activity was when we were actually doing psychic work. And what he found with me, and I laugh, is that my brain was in the exact opposite realm of every other psychics he ever dealt with. So he was trying to figure out, like, why do you work in a different part of your brain? Like, I think he was saying I was working in theta level or something like that. I can't remember the exact level, but he said it was odd. And I looked at him and I said, well, I had a traumatic brain injury when I was 20 years old. I went through the windshield of a car and had a traumatic brain injury. And he looked at me and he said, interesting. Cause he said, you're the only psychic that I've worked with that had a TBI that doesn't work in the same psychic level, because that's like I had a boost in activity after that car accident. And I saw the light. Well, I didn't see a light. I saw an old man who told me to get back in the car. And, I woke up in the car and was telling them, oh, just open the door. I was just out sitting on the bank. And my friend was actually one of the first responders. And he said, dude, you were dead. And I was said, "No, I wasn't dead." And I was talking to that old man, and he's like, "What old man?" And so for me, like after that experience and having that TBI is when I started experiencing so much more, and it made sense because
Mm.
when I don't dream, and the only time I do, if I do, I don't remember them, and the only time I do remember them is when it's something like a psychic dream. Like right
Right.
before Easter, I had a dream that my daughter-in-law was pregnant. And I woke up and I said, "Nah, it's not gonna happen. Their baby's 2. They don't want another one right now." Well, Easter Sunday, she showed up at my house with my grandson with a shirt that says, "I'm gonna be a big brother."
Yeah.
So I looked at my husband and I said, "God damn it, I need to stop having those dreams."
Well, you know what? Because I'm the same way as you. And in 2007, it stopped. And the reason why I believe it stopped is because I blocked myself because I had a dream. And the dream was I was it was a hospital, like an emergency room, in a surgery room.
Mhm.
And I'm floating. I don't see myself obviously, but well, not obviously, but I can't see myself. I'm floating, and I see this woman, but I can't see her face, and she has curly blonde hair, and she gave birth to a girl. But there was something wrong with the baby. In her vagina, there was teeth in the vagina. So when I saw that, I woke up because this always used to happen to me. I woke up and I blurted out whatever I thought and I was like, oh my god, my friend at the time, maybe I'll say T. I was like, oh my god, T's gonna have a miscarriage because she was pregnant, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I was like,
Right.
I
Do you,
can't
do you
tell her,
tell them or don't you?
right?
Like
And like
that's
3 days later,
horrible music.
well, 3 days later, she had a miscarriage.
And that's the kind of thing that sets a lot of us to the point that I don't want this in me
Right. And then
because like
after that, after that, then I kept getting this feeling with her, like of emptiness or whatever. And then a month later, she had an aneurysm and passed. And me
oh
and her were
wow.
tight. She was a coworker of mine,
Mhm.
and we were tight. And ever since then, I don't get those dreams anymore. I don't get
And
those
that sounds
dreams.
to me like you did put up that, like my son,
Mhm.
that internal block because you don't want. With me, I've tried
Yeah.
because like the worst was when my former boss of mine was a very severe addict. And I had a dream where I saw him in a ditch, dead, in a ditch in the middle of nowhere. And it like totally threw me into all kinds of clamor because like this is someone that I considered family. And to see that was the scariest thing ever. And I'm like, dude, hey, you gotta get better. You gotta get off that crap because you're gonna die. And people look at me like, well, how would you say that to someone? I'm just giving them the message from wherever,
Well,
whoever gives us that.
in that sense, I would totally relay that message.
But
But
it's
with
so
my
hard when you think of
partner,
someone pregnant, you're gonna have a
yeah,
miscarriage.
I
Like
couldn't.
I couldn't, because my feeling would be if I said something like that to somebody, I would get blamed for causing it. Like,
That's
you put that
right.
out there. Like, I
Don't
tell
put
my
the
kids all the
line.
time, don't put that energy out there.
Right.
You know, like I'm a big
But see,
believer
that's
in
the
that.
thing. After that, even though I knew it wasn't my fault, I still
You
felt
still feel guilty.
guilty.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Because
was
you saw
weird.
it. Was I supposed to tell them? And maybe,
And I had
but
those thoughts. All those thoughts came. Yep.
and that's what I think is interesting. Like, because like you say metaphysical a little bit differently than my understanding of it. Like like I believe metaphysics, not so much that I believe it, it's just always the way I heard the term.
Right, right.
And to believe in like not even so much spiritual but in things like reiki and yoga and things where you're working energy and energy workers. But I never called my like I never tell people like, well, I'm metaphysical. I tell them, well, I'm an energy worker. I am,
Right.
I'm a minister. I'm interfaith. I'm this, but I never say like I'll say like some I have some people on. I had a girl that talked about past life regression and she said it's metaphysics, and I just could never wrap my head around that because in a way like
Good.
I knew that wasn't
Yeah. It
the
literally
the
means
root
having
of like when you
behind
take words
physics.
apart. And
Yeah,
that's what I tend to do. Like I was a geek, I was one of those
that's what it
people that
means.
took SAT prep to the extreme and learned to break down words into their roots and their subparts. And I'm just like, this doesn't make sense to me. Why does everybody use this word? Who coined
Because
this
it's
phrase?
the same way that everybody's invoking science now. It's because it sounds catchy and cool and mystical and
Yeah,
it
I don't
literally
remember
means
science being pulled in. Like, I mean, I think the first time I ever saw anything relevant to science and the paranormal was like ghost hunters. And I don't even think that they were really sciency. I think they just had tech. So when I saw the tech, I thought science.
Yeah, which is a lot of people.
right, which a lot of people do, and
Yeah.
for some reason they think that that's the last word. What they fail to see sometimes is that everything science is one avenue to information and knowledge. It is not the only one. It is not certainly the last word or the governing one. Theology, spirituality, philosophy all govern each other, and they
Mhm.
all speak to things differently than the other that are equally important. Especially in science and in that whole technology move, the first person perspective is almost absent entirely from any discussions that have to do with consciousness, which is ironic because consciousness is, for all of us, a first person subjectivity, but it's missing from all those discussions. This is again why I kind of circle back to the idea of having an understanding of what your metaphysical position is, because then from that you can find where you're either contradicting yourself or you can figure out maybe something that makes more sense to you. Not that any one metaphysics has it figured out, but if you're jumping all over the place between them, then you have a completely incoherent position. You're gonna get off the beaten path one way or another. The
Well, the
one thing
thing.
I hold
Go
on
ahead. Go
before I
ahead.
get, because I wanted to ask you, with your abilities, you said you had a traumatic brain
Yeah,
situation,
traumatic brain
right?
injury.
Did you have abilities that you knew of before that?
Yes, I've had
Me
abilities
too
since
with
I was a little
reading.
Okay,
girl,
and then all right, so I forgot that part.
but
Yeah,
they enhanced
they got more
All right,
after
so
after that period of time. Like
that's why I'm
what
asking.
abilities I had. It's really funny because we're talking about radios, right? When I would get psychic impressions as a child, they would come to me through my radio. I
Okay.
don't know if it was my radio talking to me or not, but like my grandmother passed away. My friend was at the house and we were in my room, listening to music and playing around. I heard the phone. I didn't know who was on the phone. I was, a floor and a half away. But I heard the phone ring. I started picking up because right around that same time, I heard my radio tell me my grandmother was dead. So my friend's like, "What are you doing? Why are you picking up?" I'm like, "You have to go home. My grandmother just died." And she looked at me and she said, "What is wrong with you?" And the same thing, we were at a school dance and my two of my friends, they were out and they were driving and they were gone shopping somewhere. And I heard through the speaker, you know, AJ's dead. And I went into the bathroom and I was like freaking out. And, but I never had like I have since my accident. Like I went from hearing things to through a radio, like things have happened and things like that, to now I hear dead people. Like I get committed myself for a period of time to a psychiatric hospital. I actually had a doctor tell me I was schizophrenic. Although the medicine never worked because of the voices were still there. But they would ask me like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Well, you know the movie The Sixth Sense, how the kid sees dead people? Well, I hear them." And nobody would come around me in the psych ward. Now that's pretty bad when you're in a psych ward and everybody's afraid of you,
Yeah.
because I would hear, and I said, I hear dead people. And like still to this day, I'll be having, and a lot of times I see them and I feel like they're real. When I'm in different locations, I'll be having conversations and I think there's people there and people will be like, "Who are you talking to?"
Well, it's interesting that they used to hear, or that you did or still do, I don't know, through the radio, because there's something obviously with you and white noise, and that's why you listen to white noise, and
Right.
that kind of makes sense that you would hear it through the radio, and it's probably through the white noise within
Yeah,
the
and I don't, and that's why, like, when you say about it, like with the radio stuff, and that's why I always ask questions about that, because of my earliest experiences. I heard these voices come through my radio speakers or it's speakers at a dance through a DJ's speakers. And I never had them in here. But
But
then after my accident, I started getting them in here
yeah.
where I have full-fledged conversations with myself.
Oh, I do
so
that all the time.
so what you consider having come through the speakers or come through the radios? Were you alone every time that happened, or the other
No,
people?
I was with my friend.
So,
Uh,
but nobody else heard it, right?
Nobody else heard it but me. Like
So
at the dance, I was with 100 other people, and I'm the only one that heard AJ's dead.
Yeah.
So that there may be something that happened with that, where the experience was modulated to where somebody who's more porous under idealism. When I mentioned before that there's one mind, one universal
Hmm.
phenomenal consciousness, and we're all fractal parts of it. Um, where in nature do we see something like that happen, which is dissociative identity disorder? So I'm not saying it in the sense that we call it a pathology, right?
Right.
But it is a model in nature that you could extrapolate onto a larger scale. If you go with that, then we have a dissociative boundary, which is why you can't read my thoughts, I can't read yours. My thoughts would exist even if you weren't here, and vice versa.
Right.
But people who tend to be legitimate mediums seem to have a higher level of porosity or a more permeable boundary with the transpersonal space, with the world out there that we share. So that might have been modulating something that you were more apt to hear or experience. So it may not necessarily have come out of the speaker, but the noise from that may have modulated the experience where someone who
And
has
that's what I was
the
wondering as we've
sensibility
been
could
talking,
have it
know?
right. The other thing I was getting at before with the traumatic
Wait, could
brain
have
injury.
went through the speaker because she could still be porous, and if she's picking up the res, and it could have still came out through the speaker because it came out through the speaker.
It, yeah, it could have.
Yeah, well, it did.
It could.
It did.
Yeah,
Well, that
to
could be
me
the
it
perception.
was very real that it came through the speaker.
That
Right.
right. That could be the
But
perception.
it
It could
could,
have come
right,
out of
it
the
could have
speaker,
been my
right?
She picked
perception
it
of
up
what
because,
happened.
but that's why, because you're more porous than other people, you were
Right.
able to perceive it.
Right.
And then probably if she believes that it came out through the speaker, I'm gonna say that she's probably right, and she was more porous and was able to pick it up. That's what
Yeah,
I
cuz when I relax, but it's odd because the only way I can relax is with white noise.
Right. The only reason I'm leaning the other way is that because when you lean on the idea of porosity with a dissociative boundary,
Mhm.
you're no longer functioning under the auspices of your auditory sense input. Right? So the porosity wouldn't apply to your sensory input with your ears, but it would apply to you picking up on something environmentally
But
that
that's
was
what I'm
not
saying.
right. But if you're saying she heard it through the actual speakers, then being more porous would not be a player in that game.
Of course, it has to be, honey, because when
That's
you
what I but hey,
because
I'm an anomaly, I'm telling y'all.
Yeah, no,
anyway, we'll discuss that
yeah,
another time
it would.
between me
Yeah.
and you.
Well,
She
no,
does.
and I always say that because for me, I didn't know life where I wasn't hearing things.
Right, right, right,
So like but like I said, with the brain injury, it just things went to
right.
million
That's
following
the other
that.
reason I was asking, because there's something called acquired savant syndrome, where sometimes when people go through things like that,
Hmm.
like you did, they all of a sudden have this ability to be a concert pianist at like expert level, or
Yeah,
they
I
develop.
wish I got that level.
Right.
Like I'd rather have that than have the conversations with people that aren't real. Because well, they're
But they
real. At
real.
some point, they
Yeah.
were real, but
Right,
I have so many people that just like will say, "Man, you're like the town I live in is so like anti all this. Like I am the worst. Like I get so much crap." But
Oh.
yet they're the ones that come running to me on the weekend saying, "Can you do a reading for me? But don't tell my husband." You
Oh.
know?
yeah, yeah. What
But
I wanted to
but
say,
I'm the bad person any other time. Like, she's
I
the
know
weirdo. Well, I also live
on the
amongst
same.
Mennonites and Amish, so
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say about analytic idealism, what's good about analytic idealism is that it doesn't clash with the sciences. It
Right.
doesn't
right.
clash with anything that we already know. And it actually makes the paranormal a normal experience. It's a normal experience
Yeah.
that we don't usually, because there's exceptions to everything. So we experience life, and every
Hmm.
once in a while we'll experience what we describe as a paranormal, but it's really just a normal experience that you're experiencing that
Yeah.
Right.
doesn't usually happen because it has it's variables
It's
or whatever.
nature doing what it does. And
Right.
just because we don't pick up on it all the time doesn't mean that it's something fantastical. We don't pick up on radio stations right now that are flying past our heads. You get at the radio and you turn it on. What does it do? It modulates it so that now your sensory input, your dashboard that you have, right? Because that's the metaphor that through idealism and Dr. Castor uses, is that we're born into the cockpit of a plane. Right? We have sensors that tell us what's going on in the world around us to get the salient points so that we don't walk under a truck and we don't die. Right?
Yeah.
But we know that it's not telling us everything. Like we know that there's infrared, there's infrasound, right? There's certain things that we don't pick up. So we know that there's more out there than what it is that we pick up, but our sensors tell us what's going on. So when the radio's flying past our heads right now, we're not experiencing it. There's no readout on our dashboard. As soon as you modulate it, now you hear music, now your dashboard is registering something that it didn't register before. It doesn't mean it's magical. It
Right.
just it just means it existed at a level that we were not able to detect it. A pilot can fly and land a plane on instrumentation alone. Doesn't need to know everything about what's going on there. You can black the windows out. The difference between humans and what we get from our senses and the pilot is the pilot never mistakes this dashboard for the sky. We
Right.
do. We think that everything we get through instrumentation is everything in its totality that's out there. That's the entire world as it is. We're taking it like a whole mirror image of it. There's nothing left, and
Yeah.
it's not the case. And why would it be?
And that's the thing, like, if you look at the world in general, you think of, and I'm thinking, cryptozoological here, so just bear with me a moment.
Hmm.
We haven't even discovered everything on the planet Earth yet. We
Right.
barely touched the surface of the ocean.
Seriously.
And so it's just like how much is out there. Like, and I always say, like, we've haven't even skimmed the surface of the human brain and what it's capable of doing. And that to me, that's as sciency and geeky as you'll hear me get, because those are things that intrigue me. Like, people like when they have Bigfoot conversations, and it's only
Hmm.
because I've been talking to a lot of cryptid people lately, and they'll be like, but just think about it, like how much of the world have we not touched yet?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very possible these things could be hiding. And so
Yeah.
like, and I look at that with, with the world of the paranormal. Like how do we know that that ability to communicate beyond the veil for these beings or whatever they are to communicate with us isn't something that's actually pretty normal, but we just haven't begun to understand how to
Yeah.
do it. Like my husband always tells me when I bring home these gadgets, because that's what he does. He's an electrical guy. He does electrical motors, and that's what he does. He rebuilds them. He spins coils. I don't know. I just know that he does a lot of cursing when he's doing it. But I'm not techie like that. He put me on a machine to try to spin a copper coil, and I went like this the whole time and got sick and passed out. So I that's why. But I mean, that's what he does. And so, like with me, I bring home all this tech and stuff, and he'll look at it. And he'll be like, "But what's the premise? Like, what's it? What did the spirits come up and touch it?" And I'm like, "No, it picks up." And he said, "But do you know that that's entity is giving off like EMF?" And I'm like, "No, but the premise is like, what do we know? We don't know anything really." But, the premise is temperature changes. There's, different frequencies that are attached. And, I said, I don't know because I don't do tech. With me, what I notice is there's a change in the atmosphere. The hairs on my arms will stand up straight. I will get goosebumps upon goosebumps, and then things start talking to me. That's what I know. So is that goosebumps EM? I don't know.
Listen, if you think about it, there's we're four people in the room, and someone walks in, that person just changed the atmosphere. So
Right.
see, so it could be temperature changes or things like that. But with the equipment though and the EMF, it can be triggered by just the natural environment that's surrounding us right
I
now.
got one. I triggered one
Discernment.
with a remote control. I
Oh,
did. I triggered one with a infrared remote and made a detector go off. Just I didn't know that my remote would do that, but it did. So,
so there
but
could be a change in the atmosphere,
Yeah,
but we
and
just
that's
yeah, we
that.
don't know
You're right.
exactly right. But if
we
the
don't know what
person
it
that walked
is,
in the
but
room
I
is
know what I feel. I know
yeah,
what I feel as a
right.
as a psychic or a medium. I know what happens to me physically, and that's why I always say I leave I love to look at the sciencey stuff. And I have my crystal pod, I have my seer. My daughter made me get a SB, whatever, something T, whatever it is. I don't I let them use it. Now my crystal pod I will put out because I just like the way it looks. And I think there's something there with the crystals, being someone that works with crystals very frequently and the body itself. For me that, that's what sold me. Crystals. Yeah, well, you
No,
can
I
put
love
crystals,
crystals. I love
you can put crystals on anything, like a toothbrush, and I'll buy it.
I have the
Yeah.
total of crystals right there. Oh, I love crystals.
Well,
I
and
love
I
rocks.
use as a psychic, if I'm doing readings, I actually use crystals. I sear into them. I scribe with crystals. I see things in them, like, obsidian especially. But, like, I don't know, I'm still fascinated by the things that all the bells and whistles, even though I don't know how they work and I can't explain to somebody how they work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of times too is that people jump very quickly from correlation to causality. Like, and if a piece of equipment goes off, yes, there was a change in EMF, a spike, or a temperature change, or something happens, but you still haven't connected the dots between
Exactly.
Aunt Martha's ghost that you think is walking around the house and then the blinky light. Like, it's not that
Is yeah.
quick a judgment to make.
Or maybe it's right under some wires. Whatever
Right.
the case may be.
And
Yeah.
There's
yeah,
a
and
lot
with
of
me, I just know that like Malvern Manor is a place that I use a lot because I had so many extreme experiences there. And like I would walk down the hall and every like my whole arm, all the hairs would be standing upright and I wasn't cold.
Yeah.
And and so those are things that I look for within myself. And is that what this machinery is reading? I don't know.
Yeah. Because I
But I
used
like
to
to
be
think
aware.
maybe it is because I've had the machines go off at the same time my
Well,
body goes off.
well, that's what I was just about to say. Maybe, but see, that's the thing. That's your experience. And then if you tell someone else, they may not believe you. But at least you know that there may be something there because
Exactly.
you that went off. That went off, and you felt the goosebumps or whatever. I usually feel them here in my face. I don't know why, but yeah. So then that's something.
And I get a lot in the back of my neck.
Me too.
And I don't know why. Someone told me a lot of times entities like to enter through the base of the neck for some reason. I don't believe that, but it was a theory I was given. But, for me, like I conducted a seance in an attic at Malvern and literally watched a 200 plus pound guy get drug across the floor by something.
Mm,
And he was a skeptic. And I think everybody knew he was a skeptic, including the spirits, because he was the only one that was physically moved. Like, and he was a big guy. I mean, I was big at the time. I was over 300 pounds. And I didn't realize he was being moved until he jumped up and started cursing. And then everybody that was watching it on camera downstairs literally were saying they watched him get drug into this like little alcove where the window was. And I'm like, wow, man. And he
Yeah.
was right next to me. And I didn't I didn't know nothing. I just thought he was restless.
Yeah.
Now I'm interested because you said you guys have some clips of how this
Yeah.
works. I'm interested because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So being able to hear sometimes I process things better, and hopefully other people can too.
Yeah, I can do a share screen, and then what you'll see um, is another camera, so to speak, the way you saw us when we first came into the show. We
Right.
have to put it on the stage, and then if you want, you can. There's a screen setting. You can put our window in yours, so they're not gone, but they're smaller to the side. And
Right.
then
Yep.
okay, so this will be what takes precedence with it. Um,
Okay.
so I have a second screen set up so purposely I can keep us on camera and do this too.
Perfect.
Um, so there you'll see it.
Okay.
Okay.
And
There you go. Yes, perfect. So
I can
I
learn.
can learn.
no, you got it.
Oh, there she goes.
You got it. So
Okay.
this is interesting because what we believe as idealists, and then what we were speaking to before is that what we're communicating with is consciousness, and when someone passes per survival theory, it's their consciousness that continues. Now, we don't necessarily think that there's little substrate independent consciousnesses, floating around within universal consciousness. We think, you used the word before, we think they reassimilate back. But the same way, if that's one mind, one consciousness overall, right, for reality, the same way that your one mind can have clustered um, memories, right, of somewhere you were, the song you heard, what you were wearing, how you felt. And we think the same way that these conscious experiences, and perhaps even as what Federico Fagin, who's the inventor of the microchip, who's an idealist, also calls seities, which are autonomous complexes within like universal consciousness. So then you have something just shy of personal agency with regards to what we communicate with, because it's a way to try to reconcile if there's one mind, and how do we get what seems like different identities talking to each other, different voices. And I would say, where in nature do we see one mind do that? When we dream. When you
Mhm.
dream, right? You have other people, places, cars, roads, animals, trucks, whatever. And in the dream, you only identify as you. You dissociate from the rest of the dream. You hear those people's voices, the dog bark, everything's distinct. When you wake up, you don't mourn the loss of your dream avatar because you realize, oh, it was one mine, that did all of that. So from that, we would extrapolate that this is how nature and reality works. So these are voices that we get, or communications that we get, that we believe may be autonomous little clusters or complexes within that one mind of reality, which is consciousness. This specific clip is one of the clearest ones we've probably gotten to date. The voice identifies as consciousness,
Oh
Oh,
wow.
wow.
quite clear, which is what kind of took me with this. And then it refers to, we mentioned we had been partnered with Tony Rathman before. It mentions Tony shortly after in this as well. So, which is interesting because the name had relevance too for that time. So here's the first one. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's an example of one of them. Sometimes they are supremely clear like that. Sometimes they're harder to understand. So it'll vary. Do I think that that's unreasonable or devaluing to the process? No, I pay Verizon every month, and they can't always get it right.
I
I
agree.
agree.
And that's on this side of what we call the veil. So um, there's that. This is from, we did a few episodes last year of My Haunted Manor USA out in Columbia, PA, with Daryl Marston, Jeff, and Trey Bader. We ended up being on 3 episodes because of what we got there, and then we just did 2 more with them recently. This was from the basement there, and this is a great example of when you hear when we're not talking, it's quiet and you don't hear the noise at all.
If they started digging, what would they find?
Person.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, ask the person.
Is it a male or a female person? Male or female? Woman.
Woman.
A woman.
So Lourdes gets a little excited.
I do. I always get super excited.
I would be too.
Well, I don't. You can't blame her for that one because she asked the magic question that kicked all that off.
Yeah, it was crazy.
This is from a couple of weeks ago at Peachfield Plantation in New Jersey. Oftentimes, if the audience or the attendees, even if it's private, aren't asking questions, and I like to listen far more than I like to talk when we do these because I don't want to miss anything. But sometimes just for showing communication, showing that there's some kind of connection, and I've been doing this for a long time now, people know me for doing it, I'll take my glasses off and I'll hold them up and I'll ask them to tell me what I'm holding. So in this specific instance, they referred to them by a different word, and they said it twice. The first time I actually thought was clearer, but because it was right at the tail end of me talking, I don't think anybody heard it. The second time, everybody heard it, and then it replays them just so you can kind of get a sense of what it was. So can you see us? Yes or no? I heard the yes. It was low. If you can't see us clearly,
You can see this.
okay. Can you tell everybody just to verify you see us? Can you tell everybody what am I holding up? Clearly, slowly, what am I holding up?
Oh, that was
I heard that.
nice.
How many of you guys heard that?
I believe that.
I'm like, if he says glasses, I'm not gonna buy it.
Holding up. Slowly, what am I holding up? Slowly, what am I holding up?
Oh, that was.
So that was fairly recent.
Do you hear them?
Oh yeah, I did.
And it's easier to hear them without the noise of the ghost box too. That's one of the differences that this has done.
I totally like that better than the ghost box.
Oh yeah. Although I do like white, I like the sound of white noise though. I do,
have the
just
one
like
from,
you.
from the ties in here.
You can show that one. That one's a good one.
This was an interesting. We did a place in New Jersey with 2 of the ladies from the Paranormal Peaches group, and the former owner of the place was sitting with us, and one of the ladies from the Peaches asked whatever spirit, where were they from? Because this place was a local gathering place under a variety of different things. I forget. It used to be a religious place.
Well, a gathering for there was a church across the street,
it.
and that's where they went to, unite.
Yeah.
Or reunite.
So she asked where they would be from, and then the owner named a subset of that town, a little subsidy of that town, which we had never heard of. But if you look on the map, it's exactly where it would have been. Yep. So this for us was one of those examples where you can't say we're hearing what we want to hear because we didn't even know what it
never
was.
heard the word.
But they recognized it, and then the voice says it again.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you'll see it. I pulled the map up on it so you could see what it was. But this was fascinating because I don't think anybody expected the name of the subsidy of the town. They expected just the main town name, and then for us, we didn't even know the name.
You want to go home?
I heard yes.
What town did you live in?
Oh, what about sick?
Oh!
What did you hear?
Sick! I heard it.
I heard
I'm
it.
stopping on that one, and I have not heard that. I got it on video.
And when we were upstairs, we heard a banging. Do you know who might have banged or hit into something?
Chair. Did you hear the chair?
Yeah.
I heard
The chair, they bumped into the chair.
To get your attention.
I heard it. I totally
I
heard
didn't
it.
hear it, but
I totally heard it.
That gives you an idea of another instance of it. And as you can tell too, some of the newer ones are a lot more quiet than some of the older ones. That's something we put a lot of time into.
Mm-hmm.
Only do if you have time the bad connection and damnation.
That's what I was gonna do. Okay, so these two, this one, quick backstory. We had to upgrade the computer we use as we built this system out with the software. We ran out of resources on the original computer, and it was buffering and going like pulsing and buffering. So this one specific night before we had made the computer upgrade, I freed up some resources. I got rid of that effect, and then started recording again. And immediately asked what happened here, what happened to us, and the voice came through and reported on exactly the problem we were having.
What happened here? What happened to us? Sorry about that.
Which I heard and apologized for in real time.
Wow.
um,
And you should play maybe your mom's, because that's a
All right.
touching one.
all right, so yeah, I got two more, and then I have a little promo thing if you'll
Oh, definitely.
if you'll allow it. So we mentioned slowing down live white noise in real time, and it had not been done before. The reason that she and I came up with the idea to do this was because this one instance in Vernon, New Jersey, with a few friends, we were doing an investigation, and I was setting it up and running it to just make sure it was working. And I heard on. Some voice said on, so I went, it's turned on. When I listened to it later on, 50% slowed down. What I heard was what I believed to be my mother and my grandmother. The voice has emotion. You can hear that it's female. It says mom, and then it also names Lucy, which was my mother's mother. In real time, I would have never heard it without slowing it down. On this recording, this is the first time we thought to slow down in real time, because this was after the fact, and it's 50% slowed down to where I sound intoxicated, but the voice sounds completely clear and normal. So that's how fast it came in, and why it's important to know with reverence who's done what work before you, because of the original pioneers of voice phenomena research in Europe. One of which was named Konstantin Rodove, who was a Jungian idealist. And Rodove said that these voices come in not only faster than we can detect them, but they come in faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking, which is something she can attest to, because she is by trade a licensed court reporter. And she validated, there's no way, right?
No, there's not. They're either they'll slur on their words. If they're talking that fast, they'll smush the words together. That if they're talking, there's no way that they could have spoke that fast. And before he plays it, it's interesting. They sometimes they come in so fast that even slowing it down, if we didn't, we would never hear it. And they're like still fast.
Yeah.
And it's slowed down, and they're still fast. So you could imagine how fast these voices are coming in.
Yeah. So that's also something that we found kind of interesting. So this is the one. This was the impetus for us coming up with the idea to slow it down in real time, just pure white noise.
You know who I am? It's turned on. Is my mother gonna be here tonight?
So in real time, I didn't hear anything but on, or so I thought.
Oh no, you did. You only heard on.
Yeah.
um.
And then damnation.
Yeah, you want to explain that one too?
Yeah, this one was from the infamous and famous all one Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York, which is like a second home for us a lot of times. This one is also for us in a class by itself. To date, I think it might be not just for us, but for anything else. I'm not familiar with any other vocal recording in ITC of this length. It's one voice that's literally on a rant for like a minute and change.
Wow.
I know sessions. We've had sessions that go longer than 30 minutes or whatever, where you can continue dialoguing. But this is the longest one continual voice on a rant that I've ever heard through an ITC methodology before. If there's another one that exists that's longer and this clear, I'd be fascinated to hear it. Not that I doubt it, but just because it's just incredible that the one voice would come through this much. But
it's a little under a minute.
Yeah,
a little under.
A little under.
Yeah.
So it's called Damnation because that's one of the things in it. And you'll hear background chatter, which is also what was the impetus for the whole seance, digital seance experience thing. Because people in real time who were in the room, other than the bionic ear sitting next to me, didn't hear all of this.
Yeah, you hear me in the background. I don't catch all the words.
She's calling shit out.
Yeah, but you hear me in the background repeating some of the words because I'm trying to listen and I'm a little like pissed because I'm trying to listen and everybody's like doing their thing. But
yeah, so she's the one that's identifying words in this mishmash.
If you can hear me because it's pretty loud.
He can hear you a little bit. So this is it. This is Damnation. There's some language in it, and this is probably the most dark sounding thing we've ever gotten. And I don't think it's dark. I think it's it mentions the D word, and I think it's metaphorical. I think it either means, like she says, either your personal demons, your own vices and stuff, or I think maybe it also means, or could predominantly mean, how our culture celebritizes the whole idea of everything's a demon with the paranormal stuff.
Yes.
That's not a smart move. That's what I think it means. It could mean either one, but
it could mean both.
I don't think it means mythical winged creatures. I don't think it means that. We could be wrong.
Why are you so angry?
Not fair, I heard.
Yeah.
You know what we're doing. What is the easiest
Isn't that crazy?
Do you know what it reminds me of? An old-fashioned preacher.
Yeah.
Like you go to the tent revivals?
Yeah. It's creepy.
Yeah.
And people missed it, so that's why we decided to do something of a seance nature to try to get people to have, because if they walk away from the event thinking they didn't experience anything, that's not just bad for us. It's really bad for the location or the event because it takes away from what they thought they experienced at that place. So we
Mhm.
do what we can without being too stringent like rule makers to set some kind of protocols and groundwork just so that people experience what we're doing. Because I think it's sad that they would be there and something like that would happen, and most of the people in the room probably don't realize that they listened through
I'd be
that,
mad if I missed that.
right?
I'm glad that we made that move because we have had, like, I think maybe I mentioned it, I don't know, but we've had life changing experience for some people. And our very first one was a 15-year-old girl who she believed she was speaking to her grandmother because she was hearing things that she only knew. And she asked, um, Grandma, if this is you, what is the TV show we used to watch when we were little? Now I'm gonna make up a show because I can't remember it, but something like Dr. Roberts came out, and she's like, "Oh, something no one ever heard of," and she's like, "That's it, that's the show, Dr. Roberts," and it was life changing. She was crying and she was thanking us, and ever since then, as we keep doing it, it's been happening more and more. But I believe if we didn't move into the digital seance experience, that change, we may not know that we were having these experiences because everybody's talking, and so it was a good move to do that.
Yeah, yeah. That's it's funny because one of the people who made direct radio voice most famous in Europe was a little Italian gentleman named Marcello Bacci. Um, I was mentored into direct radio voice from Dr. Annabella Cardoso. She's the last surviving of the old guard, the people who pioneered voice phenomena research in Europe, not the TV pioneers, the actual pioneers from Europe. She's the only one left, but everybody who did the groundwork on ITC, the guy who came up with the term ITC, Dr. Ernst Sinkowski, physicist, Konstantin Radove, Friedrich Jurgensen, the father of direct radio voice, Marcello Bacci, Hans Otto Koenig, she sat with all those people. Then she did the first about the author and endorsed my first book, and she's endorsed a few things for us since. And we did not realize, with Bocce being the person who put this on the map, that we would end up on the same path. We just wanted to see if we could replicate what they were doing. Like, is that something that's exclusive to him? Because people used to talk about him having mediumistic capabilities, but I don't think that the nexus of what he was doing was that. I think there's maybe part of it in the sense that she mentioned before about that we're part of the equation. So we just want to see if we could do what they were doing, or this was like a one-off kind of thing. And we did not realize that we would be doing what he did, which is he had regular sittings. I don't know if it was weekly or monthly in Versetto, Italy, mostly parents who lost children prematurely, and he would give them these moments of closure or solace. And so we didn't start out to do that, but as we started bringing this out to public events and paracons, that ended up being the calling card, like and the huge payoff or reward for us. Um,
Because that was life changing for me, and it made me realize, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Like, I feel that this is what we're supposed to be doing.
yeah.
So yeah.
So we do a bunch of the paracons, including Penhurst, but some of them, like the New Jersey one, we get a room and we do sittings, digital seance sittings. Every hour we'll close the door for 30 minutes and let people actually interact with it. Instead of doing a typical expo, here's our equipment on the table, check it out, we actually let them interact with what we do because of the uniqueness of it. And every year we have tissue boxes getting passed around from people having some kind of profound moment. Last year in the New Jersey one, 3 people in the same session had tears from very profound things, but one of them, which is kind of one of my favorite stories to tell. There was an older woman who lost her son when he was 15. And his name, Willie, came through. The fact that he played drums came through. A few things that connected dots to her were very specific came through. So she's very emotional, and she's eternally grateful. She sent us the nicest email I think I've ever gotten.
But tell her what the medium said.
From everybody. She had been told for over I don't know how many years, several mediums, that because of the age at which her child died, which was 31 years ago, because of the age he died, that she'd never be able to get a message or connect with him. See, and every medium that we talk to, like you, has the same reaction.
I know.
Like, how could they know that? It's completely arbitrary and not even kind to say. So she's totally over the moon with what she's getting from us. Now, the kicker, um, which ties into two things: bionic hearing and the ability to pick up on things. So she hears something after all this stuff, and the lady's already kind of wowed and very
And I'm next to
emotional.
her. I'm on the floor, and
Yeah.
she's sitting down.
And so she hears something, and she looks at me, and I know she heard something. I'm like, what? She goes, and what did you hear? So she tells me, she goes, I heard mention cookies. And I'm thinking, well, all right, I like cookies. It's not a bad thing. If the spirits know, it's yes, let's get some sugar. But that's not what it was. Um, so she says it, and when the lady hears it, now she starts crying more.
Now she's just crying like, boy.
And it turns out that 11 and a half months, maybe before, almost a year prior, she was diagnosed with diabetes. She had not had anything like that since. The morning of the expo, before she came there, she baked a tray or two of sugar-free cookies, and she had them with her in her purse at that moment in a Ziploc bag. So somebody said, say, mention cookies, and she was by herself. So there was no way for anybody but her at that entire expo with thousands of people going through that could have known what she told, what we validated with that.
So she's perceiving this voice she's perceiving this voice to be her son, and then this voice now says mention cookies.
Yeah.
So now that was profound for her because of what these mediums freaking told her. So it made her feel like he's always been around. He's always around her. He's there. It gave her peace. It gave her peace. So and I believe that's what this is for. Any medium, all of this, if it's whether through tech or someone like you, we're supposed to help each other. That's what it's for.
Yeah. That's the oneness part of the whole universal consciousness thing that we talk about that I think people miss. A lot of people in the paranormal miss it with the whole trying to invoke science all the time and trying to quantify everything. I think we get off the path. We don't realize where the value is in doing this stuff. Dr. Kastrup says that, and I love this, we fail to read the message for the sake of describing the envelope.
Right.
So we miss where all the meaning and value is because we're just trying to quantify the shit out of everything to try to see if we can explain things and invoke science, and we're missing a lot of the point and a lot of the value. So this stuff that we ended up doing became the value to us. So we can argue metaphysics in different positions and all day, and that's cool for the advancement of having a positive discourse and trying to understand what reality and everything is, but as a functional part of like a paranormal community, this is for us, this is the pinnacle. We're helping people, we're giving people moments that we don't know we're going to be able to do till we get there, but it seems to be pretty consistent now. And that for us is like she said, it's a sense of purpose. Yeah.
That's what it is.
So if we can, if you'll indulge us for one more thing, we wanted to share something because we're kind of excited, and I think you'll appreciate this. I mentioned a gentleman who's built a lot of ghost box devices and stuff named J.W. Prather. He's the IDC Institute. He works with Austin Maynard as his right-hand guy. Austin Maynard is the tech guy for Nick Groff with Deathwalker, who's also a phenomenally brilliant builder of equipment, light boards, shadow boards, ghost boxes, a lot of different things, different sensors. So Austin and JW put together an experiment that is based on what we call astral travel or the out-of-body experience. From a technical standpoint, what they do with frequencies and instrumentation strapped to our heads and having us in a more meditative state through that method is called brain entrainment. And the goal of that is akin to what people achieve with psychedelics, meditation. For a while, there were kids in the news doing what was called the choking game, as they're trying to have a more heightened, visceral, vivid experience with consciousness, something that's realer than real, that just has some outlandish shit in it, but also just seems more real than real. So we were invited to not only become part of the IDC Institute, but they're doing a second rendition of the World Gate. I think the first time they had Mike Gonzalez and Steve Smith from the Wraith Chasers. So we're now going to be running the Digital Seance Experience in conjunction with what's called the Traveler's World Gate project, to see if when people are under and they're quote unquote traveling or having a more vivid conscious experience, if we can get stuff that comes out audibly that speaks to the experiences they had when they were under, and we can corroborate that and rigorously divide the information where these things are going to be gathered through exit interviews. So there will be no way for anybody to connect the dots until after everything's been aggregated. So we can just see if during this person's thing they were under between this hour to this hour, and during that session the digital seance produced, a field of purple flowers, and the person reports in their exit interview unknowingly that they were walking through a field of purple flowers. So we're looking for stuff like that to maybe correlate the phenomenon through consciousness.
And we're going to be participating. We're participants.
Yes.
So I'm very excited.
So we're gonna be
for the brain
instrumented up.
treatment.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be instrumented up to do that, as well as running digital seance with the World Gate. So I have a little promo video for it. This is literally in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, when we come to Pennhurst, we will be coming from Felicity, Ohio, where we spent a week prior to that doing this experiment. So we're driving from New Jersey to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to Ohio, and then Ohio back to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh to Pennhurst, and then coming home at the end of the week. So it's bonkers, but when you get opportunities in this field to work with great people and do something that's really, I mean, this is not a pedestrian level endeavor for the paranormal field. Nobody, what JW is doing and Austin Maynard are doing with this project is not run of the mill, kind of stuff. So we jumped at the chance to be able to participate in this. So this is a little promo for it. You get an idea what's going on.
One of the paranormal field's most innovative experiments returns this May 2025. The IDC Institute sets the stage for the next chapter of Travelers, the World Gate Project, at the Broadwell Funeral Home in Felicity, Ohio. After data analysis, review, and discussion, the project is back and better than ever. Oh, and this time, they're also adding something entirely new. The Digital Seance Experience.
They started digging. What would they find?
Person.
Oh my God!
Pushing the boundaries just got a whole lot pushier. Follow as arguably two of the most groundbreaking methods of collecting data from the other side merge. For more information about the experiments or to participate, go to idcinstitute.com/Broadwell Funeral Home.
Sorry.
I gotta turn that side off.
The way it says it.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
I gotta turn off your share screen.
Oh, okay.
There it goes. Perfect. Yeah, because it was starting to echo on my end.
Okay.
You guys were fine. It was me. I was echoing. But that's phenomenal. I mean, that is something I'd be very interested in seeing the outcome of, because like my husband is a dream walker, which I never knew until he watched Insidious with me. And he literally said, "Do you do that?" And I'm like, "Do what?" And he said, "That, And I'm like, "Walk around in your dreams?" And he's like, "Yeah, do you do that?" And I'm like, "No." And he said, "Oh." And he said, "Well, I think our kids do it." And I'm like, "Well, why do you think that?" He said, "Because when I'm out walking around at night, I see them too walking around at night." I'm like, no wonder why y'all are so tired all the time. And I said to him, like, "So what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I, walk around, check things out." He said, "A lot of times I watch you sleep." I got so mad because a lot of times get a feeling like someone's standing over me watching me when I'm sleeping.
Isn't that fascinating?
And so now when I get that feeling, the first thing I do is hit him. Because if it goes away, I know who it was. But so like I find that interesting that they're going to do something like that type of an experiment.
Yeah.
Like with me, I've never been able to get that, traveler out of body type of experience. I've
Yeah,
tried so hard
me too.
and
It
I
happened to me
just
by accident. It
well,
happened.
I've also gone to like multiple hypnotists that have given me my money back.
Oh
Because
wow.
it can't hypnotize you.
Yeah, they can't and we don't know if it's from my brain injury or not, but I was trying to quit smoking for years and I would constantly go to all these hypnotists that have like amazing track records. And we go through the whole process and like I guess I'm supposed to be deep in hypnosis and I turn around and look at them and say, "What am I supposed to be feeling?" And they'd be like, "Oh, forget it. It's obviously not working for you."
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I find anybody that, has that type of experience, like I want to have it. Like I beg to have it. I've attempted to have it. I've done deep meditations to try to achieve that state.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever had it either, except that I've had a few dreams that were experientially similar to what people describe when they've done that.
Mhm.
Um, and this is what I love about the idealist perspective is that in one sense you say it's a dream, and in the other sense you say that you're having a more porous, more vivid experience with consciousness from having a less um, emboldened dissociative boundary,
Mhm.
right? And it still can be the same experience. Like those things are not categorically different. It's
Right.
just again the words we're using to describe it. So I would say as an idealist that we're not even technically traveling anywhere because if you can conceive of somewhere like
You
Paris
can see it.
or right, you can see it and you can have the experience of going to it
And see,
because
I don't dream that way. When
right.
I dream, I don't see things. I
Yeah.
feel them, I hear them, I don't see.
Gotcha.
So that's what I think my disconnect is.
The
'Cause,
visual
like, I
part.
can't sit and like, "Oh, I'm dreaming I'm walking, through the beach," No, but I can say, "It's hot. I can feel sand under my feet. I can hear the ocean," but I
Yeah.
don't see it. Like, even when I read, people can see a story in there. I don't. I don't picture, actors or certain people as certain characters in books. Like, right now, I'm reading the newest Hunger Games book. The only thing that I picture is, like, a young Woody Harrelson because it's about his character. And so that's all I see is a young Woody Harrelson through the whole book, but I don't see anything else.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that's what my disconnect is with that ability because like when I experience like it'll pop up on my Facebook every once in a while. I just did it like a couple weeks ago. I'm like, okay, there's this dude, John, and I don't know him. I don't know where he came from, but he all he's doing is whistling Dixie. I'm like, who does he belong to? Because he's got a message for somebody and it's somebody that I know. So somebody fess up, a John that likes to whistle Dixie. Please tell me so I can give you his message. Because that's the type of, a medium type of psychic that I am. They come to me and I have to find who they belong to. And it can be an adventure, unless I'm at a location. I like at locations, West Virginia Penitentiary, I never went into the cell blocks because my first experience there was walking into general population and seeing a man's head on a stick going back and forth in front of the windows. And I flew out and I'm in tears. I'm crying. The director of our team's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I saw somebody's head on a stick." And he's like, "You're crazy." And I'm like, "No, I'm telling you, I saw it." And the tour guy was like, "Where did you hear that story?" And I'm like, "I didn't hear a story. I'm telling you what I saw when I walked in there." He said, "We don't share that with people." I'm like, "Share what?" And I guess there was an uprising in the prison and they literally decapitated someone that they thought was like ratting them out
The
and
stick. I knew it.
stick and marched it in front of the windows for the whole town to see. So they knew what happened to rats. And just like on the other spectrum, we went over into protective custody when I was there with a group of friends. And I never walked the cell blocks because of the first experience I had there. And I decided to. And I went around a corner. And next thing I knew, I'm dropped on the floor. I'm screaming that I felt like my body was burning. And they told me I was right outside Red's cell, and he was the prisoner that was in protective custody that was killed by another prisoner in his cell.
Mm.
And so I was just like, okay, so I've had enough of this. Let's I will go back into cell. I love West Virginia Penitentiary because there's so many levels there, and I don't like prisons. I'm an insane asylum person, um, because I feel comfortable around people like that because I spent time in a psychiatric institution, so I know what that's like, even though it's a lot more, modern centers are a lot safer, and not as, Penhurst is a place close to my heart because I actually have spoken to people who work there.
Yeah.
It was a modern facility. I watched, I don't know if you've ever watched the documentary that they did that blew that place open. They were children, or it was no, it wasn't they were children. It was Suffer the Little Children. I believe it was. It's on YouTube.
We seen one. I
It's
don't know.
from like the 70s or the late 60s, early 70s. It was
Oh, I know
actually
this.
a news program that blew the window about what was happening there.
Yeah.
And I was in our area. I have two children with autism, and I was on the board of our parent to parent connections, which is, in PA, it's a statewide, but we have a local one that connects parents of disabled children with other parents to have someone to share the experience with, and, have someone who understands. And I have talked to people who actually worked in, at the time they called it MHMR. Now it's DID, the Department of Intellectual Disabilities. But they worked in the program, and they worked they went to Penhurst they had clients there.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's kind of like a personal place from experience. Now, the other place that I'm hoping to get to is Trans Allegheny. That's one of the few asylums I haven't been to yet.
Yeah. And that's probably why you will probably pick up a lot more in an asylum than perhaps a prison because of that connection. Because of that connection. Because again, remember, it works through us. So
Hmm.
that connection can be some sort of an attraction, perhaps, whatever it is. But because I know I learned from mediums that practice that, I don't practice. But one time we were doing Digital Seance Experience, and then the man asked for his wife's his
Anniversary date. Yeah.
anniversary date, and she passed in his anniversary date. And we're trying to listen, and we're trying to. He said he was seeing it all over the place, and he wanted the numbers. And we were listening, listening. Now I see a pink happy birthday sign, and so I'm looking at it, and they're well, I'm not looking at it. I see it, and then
Yeah,
we're
here.
listening,
Mind's
and
eye.
then right in the mind's eye. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
And then it was a flash because it's not like I'm looking at it, but it was there. It was not like a quick flash, but it was there. And so we're listening, and we're just about to move on. And I said, it wouldn't happen to be 414, right? And he's like, oh my god, that's the number. My birthday is April 14th.
Wow. So they were giving you that sign to let you
Right.
know it was your birthday.
Right, because and I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for working with other mediums telling me that sometimes they show
It
you
shows you
something, they show it
signs.
to you. So
Yep.
that's you probably have that connection. You probably pick up a
Well,
lot
and I
more.
do get that's how I get a lot of my readings is that, these things come to me and give me like, because I think they know I can't see. So they tell me things like the gentleman that was whistling Dixie.
Yeah.
He was from a family that was Southern based, that was, during the Civil War, that was, part of, the South. And I guess I picked him up in Gettysburg and brought him home with me. And he was insisting that he wanted to get a message out, and it ended up being someone that was still down south. And that's why he was whistling Dixie.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, so like I don't like I wouldn't see happy birthday, but I would probably get it in my head that they would probably tell me your birthday.
Yeah. 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 So
And that's what I tell people all the time when they say, picture this. And I said, please don't ask me to do that because I can't. My brain doesn't work that way.
you think it
Um,
has anything to do with the traumatic brain injury?
I don't know because when I was younger, I visualize things in color. Like I never saw pictures, but I would see colors. And
Right.
that went away, and now it's more so words or hear. I
Mm.
hear sounds, I hear songs, I hear music, I hear words, I see words, but I don't see fields. Or I would love to see that stuff because like
I
it
don't think
stinks
so.
when you hear it all the time and you're not actually witnessing it.
I'm happy you said see words because I see words. I
Yeah,
see
I do.
words.
I
Yeah.
do aura readings. And I don't read auras like most psychics that see them because they see color.
Yeah.
I see different things. I see words that come out and it'll tell me, this person has a, deep heart. They love the earth. They love the and I haven't been told yet that I'm off. I had a woman that came to her mediumship session with me that drove like an hour back home to get her husband and daughter to bring them back to where I was at to have me read them because
Right.
her son, they had just lost their 14-year-old son to cancer, and he was coming through giving me words that I couldn't have known. And
Right.
she wanted to see if he would relay them to the father and the daughter, and they all left crying. And then I start crying because I'm empathic, and
I know.
that's what I said. So, but at Penhurst, I'm definitely gonna come and like check you guys out because I have a helper with me. So, because I can only handle being in my booth for so long,
Yeah.
especially if I do readings. I
Well,
have to get up and walk away, and especially because I do want to see Katrina, and I want to meet Nick. I've never met him, so
Yeah.
there's
yeah.
not many other people there, but I want to meet Nick. The Ghost Brothers. I fell in love with them. I met them at the Warren event last October in Gettysburg.
Hmm.
Absolutely fell in love with them.
Yeah, they're the best.
They
They're so funny.
Well, I brought my daughter and her boyfriend's a person of color, and he was like, "I am going to be the only person of color at a paranormal convention. I just know it." Well, then he met the Ghost Brothers, and so every time they seen him, they made such a big deal
Oh,
about it. And
yeah.
so, like he's not a believer in the paranormal at all, but he learned a lot that weekend by seeing the things that because I was up investigating the battlefield the whole weekend after the conference, so any excuse I have because I'm gonna actually be at the Battlefield Bash this year.
Oh,
Yeah,
And
we're
I
there.
cool.
Oh, are
We're
you there too?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do it every year. So Penhurst will have a table. If we run our stuff, it'll be during one of the night investigations. We don't know for sure, but that's what they did last year. I have to reach out to them to find
Right.
out. But at Penhurst, we'll have a table where we can talk, and then if we do the investigation, we'll be running it. Gettysburg will have our own room, like we do in Jersey, where we'll be able to run it every hour.
I have a helper for Gettysburg too.
It
So
would
You
be
can come to the
it would be
well
fun to
room.
have you in the room when we're running it
Mm.
live for
well, the
people.
Appalachian Ghost Girls actually asked me to come sit with them. They're doing the first night, they're doing a Women in the Paranormal.
Okay,
And I
we
had them
heard
on
them last year.
here. I had them Jen and Coco on my show. And they said, you need to come in because you've been doing this for so long. I just wrote a book about
Awesome.
unveiling the dark side, the racism, the sexism, and the things that I experienced in my career, not as a way of like saying the paranormal is bad, but as a way of saying these are the things that we should come together and try to fix.
Right.
That's good.
Because I don't want to, I don't ever want people to think, oh, the paranormal is such a horrible thing. No, I want the paranormal to become all encompassing, accepting of all people. I lived in a wheelchair for 2 years. And do you know how hard that was? How I couldn't do what I loved because no one would allow me to because I was in a wheelchair and they didn't think I was capable. But yet I investigated the whole battlefield at Gettysburg in my scooter.
Yeah.
But this last time I was there, you know, I was able to walk the entire battlefield. So after, those few 4 years, and all the healing I've done, I had multiple surgeries and stuff to repair myself and I've lost like 117 pounds. So it all came together and now I'm back to where I was. But I want to create, and that's why I started my show, because I want people to see that the paranormal just isn't about what you see on TV. I was part of that para entertainment for a long time and I was not happy. I was not a happy person. Since I've left that entertainment section of it and gotten back into the paranormal, I have so much love for it again. And that's the side of the paranormal I want people to see and people to meet people like you guys and people to see locations like Wildwood and Hinsdale and
Yeah.
these little places that you don't hear of.
Yeah.
Hopefully that change in the landscape will make it so that there's more people who have that same passion for it, like you're expressing for yourself. Because I think a lot of people got involved when there were TV shows happening a lot, and that's dried up. So now it's like a big game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, there's no chairs, and everybody's got nowhere to sit.
But
So
there's
a lot of
still
people
so
are looking
many
for
people that
relevancy.
want to have, like, I mentor an amazing group, but he's so focused on a TV show. And I'm like, don't be focused on that because one, you don't have a gimmick. So they're not going to just pick you up because there's nothing for you to give that hasn't already been given. And I said, second of all, do it because you love it.
That's it.
Do it because you want to find answers. Do it because you want to help people. Me, I do it to help people and I do it to tell the stories.
Yeah.
I feel being a psychic, my duty, and I'm an indigenous storyteller. So, like, my job isn't to do anything other than to share stories so that people can learn from it. But I've had a wonderful talk tonight. I actually went longer than I thought I was going to. You guys now took the record for my longest episode. You told me once we got talking it would be, and I said I like to talk too. So but I do, and it especially when it's something you're passionate about. When you're passionate about what you do, it's not like a job. Like, I never thought I was going to get my last book finished. And within a matter of 3 weeks, I finished 2. One I'd been writing for 6 years about working with special needs children that have psychic gifts. And so, like, yeah, I became so passionate about getting them finished that
That's good.
I laid down and did it. Now I'm trying to finish. I'm writing an herbiary, which, forget it. Don't ever undertake something like that. Do you know how many herbs there are?
I know there
And not even focusing on the herbs themselves, but on the medicinal uses of the herbs and the magical uses of the herbs.
My grandmother was a healer, and she used a lot of herbs and plants and things
I
like
just
that.
made. So if anybody's going to be at Penhurst, if I have any left, because I have a conference, metaphysical show this weekend, and holistic. I shouldn't say metaphysical; it's holistic. And I picked purple dead nettle from my yard, and I made salve, which is for like anti-inflammatory and it's antimicrobial, it's antiseptic, it's a million amazing things, and it's vegan. I don't use beeswax. I use a vegan alternative, and it's mixed with that and yarrow. And I just finished boxing it up before our show today. I put all the labels and everything on it. And so, yeah. So if anybody wants anything like that, well, that's what I do besides readings.
That's pretty cool.
I make organic body products and I peddle them. Because you can only sell so many books, you can only sell so many readings, but everybody needs lotion and lip balm. And so I take some of what I've learned from herbalism and carried it over. But I will see you guys at Penhurst then. I'm so excited. And so I'm going to close out and I'll be right back. Okay.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. From our friends at Got Knockers, Strange Knocks Magazine. Strange Knocks Magazine is your ultimate companion for exploring the enigmatic corners of our world. Delve into the shadows with us as we uncover the mysteries surrounding cryptids like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and examine the tantalizing possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. Our pages are filled with compelling true crime stories that defy conventional explanation, alongside mind-bending conspiracy theories that challenge the status quo. Whether you're a seasoned skeptic or a curious believer, Strange Knocks Magazine invites you to expand your horizons and entertain the unexplained. With captivating articles, expert interviews, and reader submissions, each issue promises to spark your imagination and thrill your sense of wonder. Join us in our quest to illuminate the unknown, one strange knock at a time. From our friends at Got Knockers, Strange Knocks Magazine, read the description for further information. Make sure and check out our merch store at Bonfire. We are a Bonfire verified creator. Link will be in the description.